The prenuptial agreement sat on the kitchen table like a loaded weapon. 17 pages of legal language that translated to one simple message: Amanda Crawford didn't trust Daniel Hayes with her money. Daniel stared at the document, his coffee going cold in his hand, while his fiancée paced the apartment they'd shared for the past 6 months. She was beautiful in her anxiety, her designer workout clothes perfectly coordinated, her highlighted hair pulled back in a ponytail that probably cost more than Daniel's entire wardrobe. Before we dive into this shocking story, subscribe to the channel so you're always first to know. Hit like if you're ready for the next revelation, and comment where you're watching from: New York, Los Angeles, maybe Chicago. All right, let's continue with Daniel as he reads through the prenup. His wealthy fiancée insists he must sign. Daniel Hayes had met Amanda Crawford at a coffee shop 14 months ago, back when he was working as a freelance graphic designer making barely enough to cover his rent in a studio apartment in Queens. She'd been slumming it in the neighborhood for some art gallery opening, had spilled her latte on his laptop, and had been so apologetic and charming that he'd asked her out despite knowing she was way out of his league. Their first date revealed the truth he'd already suspected. Amanda came from money. Real money. Her father owned a commercial real estate empire worth somewhere north of $200 million. She had a trust fund that generated more in monthly interest than Daniel made in a year. Her apartment in Manhattan's Upper East Side cost more per month than most people's annual salary, and she'd been very clear from the beginning that she needed to be careful about who she dated, because gold diggers were everywhere. Daniel had found it amusing at first the way she'd obviously been vetting him, trying to determine if he was after her money. He'd let her pay for expensive dinners without protest, had been honest about his modest income and his studio apartment, had never asked about her family's wealth or made any moves that suggested he was interested in anything beyond her company. And apparently, he'd passed whatever test she'd been running, because 6 months into dating, she'd asked him to move into her apartment. The relationship had been good, mostly. Amanda was smart, funny, ambitious in her work running a boutique PR firm that catered to wealthy clients. She was generous with her friends, passionate about social causes, and genuinely seemed to care about Daniel. But she also had this edge of suspicion, this constant awareness of her wealth and the problems it created. She'd told him stories about friends who'd been taken advantage of, about relatives who'd married the wrong people and lost fortunes in divorces, about the importance of protecting yourself. So Daniel wasn't entirely surprised when, 3 months after he'd proposed with a ring he'd saved for 8 months to buy, Amanda presented him with a prenuptial agreement. What surprised him was how one-sided it was. "I need you to understand something," Amanda said, sitting down across from him at the kitchen table. "This isn't about not trusting you. It's about protecting what my family built. My father insisted on this, and honestly, it's just smart business." Daniel read through the key provisions. In the event of divorce, he would receive nothing from her assets. Not the apartment, not her business, not her trust fund, nothing accumulated before or during the marriage that came from her side. He would keep whatever he personally earned during the marriage, but there was a clause that seemed designed to minimize even that. Any business venture started during the marriage using marital resources would be considered community property. But since all marital resources were essentially her resources, she'd have significant claims. There was a fidelity clause. If he cheated, he got nothing. If she cheated, he still got nothing. That protection only went one way. There was a lifestyle clause requiring him to maintain employment and contribute to household expenses proportional to his income, which basically meant he'd be paying a token amount while she covered everything else. And there was a termination clause. If they divorced within 5 years, he'd get a settlement of $50,000 total. After 5 years, it scaled up slowly. $100,000 at 10 years, $150,000 at 15 years. "Amanda, this is." Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "This basically says I have no financial stake in our marriage. No matter how long we're married, no matter what I contribute, I walk away with almost nothing." "You walk away with what you came in with," Amanda corrected. "Your own earnings, your own assets. This just protects my family's money. But if we're married for 20 years and build a life together, I'd get what, $200,000? That's nothing compared to what you have." Amanda's expression hardened slightly, the way it did when she felt defensive. "Daniel, let's be honest about the financial reality here. You're a freelance graphic designer making maybe $40,000 a year. I have a trust fund worth $15 million that generates $500,000 annually. We're not equals financially, and pretending we are would be naive." The words stung, even though they were technically true. Or at least they were true based on what Amanda knew about Daniel's financial situation. What she didn't know, what Daniel had never mentioned because it had never come up, was that Daniel Hayes wasn't exactly broke. His grandmother, Eleanor Hayes, had died when Daniel was 23, leaving him a trust fund worth $8 million. The trust was structured unusually. Daniel couldn't touch the principal until he turned 40, which was still 6 years away. Until then, he received a modest monthly distribution of $2,500, just enough to supplement his income, but not enough to live extravagantly. The trust also had strict confidentiality provisions. The trustees were required to keep it private, and Daniel's grandmother had explicitly instructed him to tell no one about it until he was older and wiser. Money reveals character. Eleanor had told him in the letter she'd left explaining the trust structure. Let people know you for who you are, not what you have. When you're 40, you'll understand people better and you'll know who truly cares about you versus who cares about your wealth. So Daniel had lived modestly, never mentioning the trust, watching his friends struggle with student loans while his were paid off by distributions he claimed came from freelance work. He'd let Amanda assume he was just another struggling artist, because correcting her would have required explaining the trust, and honestly, it had been interesting to see how she treated someone she thought was financially beneath her. Now, reading this prenup that essentially called him a potential gold digger who needed to be legally restrained from accessing her wealth, Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not anger exactly, but clarity. Amanda had spent 14 months vetting him, testing him, making sure he wasn't after her money. And he'd passed every test by actually not needing her money at all. The irony was almost funny. I need to think about this, Daniel said, closing the prenup. This is a big decision. Amanda's face showed relief and something else. Maybe vindication that she'd been right to be cautious. Of course, take your time. Talk to a lawyer if you want. But Daniel, this is non-negotiable. My father won't approve the marriage without it. And honestly, I need this protection. I hope you understand. Daniel understood perfectly. Amanda saw him as a financial risk that needed to be managed, a potential threat to her family's wealth. She'd never once asked if he had any assets of his own. Never wondered if maybe his modest lifestyle was a choice rather than a necessity. She'd simply assumed that because he worked as a freelancer and lived humbly, he must be broke. That evening, Daniel called the trustee of his grandmother's trust, a lawyer named Robert Chen, who'd been managing the fund for over a decade. Robert, I need some advice about a prenuptial agreement situation. Robert listened as Daniel explained Amanda's prenup and its terms. When Daniel finished, Robert was quiet for a moment. Daniel, you realize this prenup is based on a false premise, right? She's written it assuming you're bringing nothing to the marriage financially. But you have an $8 million trust fund. I know. She doesn't know about it because I've never told her. My grandmother said to keep it private. Your grandmother's advice was wise, but now you're about to enter a marriage with someone who thinks you're poor and has written a legal agreement based on that assumption. That's problematic on several levels. What do you mean? Robert sighed. A prenup is supposed to be based on full financial disclosure from both parties. If Amanda knew about your trust, she might write very different terms. Right now, she's protecting her money from what she thinks is a broke fiancé. But actually, you're the one who might need protection. Daniel hadn't thought about it that way. You think I need a prenup to protect my trust from her? I think you need to decide if you want to marry someone who's so focused on protecting her wealth from you that she's never bothered to ask if you have wealth of your own. That's not about the money, Daniel. That's about respect and partnership. She sees you as a financial inferior who might take advantage of her. Is that the foundation you want for a marriage? The question stayed with Daniel for the next week as he read through the prenup repeatedly, consulting with his own lawyer, a family friend who'd known his grandmother and understood the trust situation. The lawyer confirmed what Robert had said. The prenup was based on incomplete information and might not even be enforceable if a court knew about Daniel's hidden assets. But here's what I'm more concerned about, his lawyer said during their second meeting. This prenup isn't just protective, it's punitive. The fidelity clause, the lifestyle requirements, the minimal settlement amounts. This reads like someone who doesn't just want to protect their assets. They want to make sure you stay financially dependent on them. That's a red flag, Daniel. Daniel met with Amanda 1 week after she'd presented the prenup. She was expecting him to sign it, had probably assumed his delay was just him coming to terms with the reality of marrying someone wealthier. Instead, Daniel brought his own document, a counterproposal drafted by his lawyer. I had my lawyer look at your prenup, Daniel said, sliding the document across her dining table. He had some concerns about the terms, so we drafted some modifications. Amanda's expression shifted from surprise to defensive. Daniel, I told you this isn't negotiable. My father, your father wants to protect your assets. I understand that. But protection shouldn't mean I have zero stake in our marriage or our life together. Daniel pointed to specific clauses in his counterproposal. I'm proposing that after 5 years of marriage, we transition to a partnership model where assets accumulated during the marriage are split fairly. Not your trust fund, not your father's money, just what we build together. That's not acceptable. Amanda's voice had an edge Daniel rarely heard. The whole point is to keep our finances completely separate. Then let's keep them separate. But that means you need to know what you're actually separating from. Daniel pulled out a third document, a financial disclosure statement his lawyer had prepared. This is my full financial disclosure. You drafted a prenup assuming I'm broke, but you never asked if that was true. It's not. Amanda read the disclosure statement, her face going pale as she processed the numbers. You have an $8 million trust fund. For the past 14 months, you've let me think you were struggling, and you have $8 million. I have a trust I can't fully access until I'm 40. Until then, I get $2,500 a month, which is exactly what I told you I make freelancing. I didn't lie, Amanda. I just didn't volunteer information you never asked about. This changes everything. Amanda stood up, pacing her apartment. You let me feel like I was taking care of you, like I was the one being generous, and all this time you were secretly wealthy. I'm not secretly wealthy. I'm secretly middle class with a delayed inheritance. There's a difference. And you weren't taking care of me. We were splitting expenses proportionally, which is what your prenup demanded. I paid my share based on my current income, just like you wanted. Amanda turned to face him, and Daniel could see her mind working through implications. Who else knows about this trust? My lawyer, the trustee, and my immediate family. I've kept it private because my grandmother specifically instructed me to. She said money reveals character, and she was right. Your prenup revealed exactly how you see me, as a financial risk who needs to be managed and restricted. That's not fair. Amanda's voice rose. I'm protecting my family's assets. That's responsible, not suspicious. Protecting your assets would be reasonable. But your prenup isn't just protective, it's punitive. It's designed to keep me financially dependent on you while giving me nothing in return for building a life together. You wrote it assuming I was desperate enough or in love enough to accept whatever terms you set. You never considered that I might have options too. Amanda sat back down, the financial disclosure still in her hands. So what now? You spring this trust fund on me and expect me to just rewrite everything. I expect you to treat me like a partner instead of a liability. I'm proposing we both protect our premarital assets. Your trust, my trust, everything we came in with. But anything we build together during the marriage, we share fairly. That's actual partnership, Amanda. What you proposed was indentured servitude with better furniture. The conversation ended badly, with Amanda angry that Daniel had deceived her by not mentioning his trust, and Daniel frustrated that she couldn't see how her prenup had revealed her true feelings about him. They didn't speak for 3 days, and Daniel moved back to his studio apartment in Queens, wondering if the relationship was over. Then Amanda called, her voice different, softer, more uncertain. Can we talk? I've been thinking about what you said, and maybe you're right. Maybe I need to reconsider how I approach this. They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop neither of them usually frequented. Amanda had clearly been crying, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled in a way that made her seem more real than she'd been in months. I talked to my father about your counterproposal, Amanda said. He was less upset than I expected. Actually, he said something interesting. He said anyone who kept an $8 million trust secret for 14 months was probably exactly the kind of person who didn't need a prenup in the first place. Daniel smiled slightly. I kept it secret because my grandmother told me to. And because I wanted people to know me for who I am, not what I have. Turns out that was good advice. It also means I've been treating you like you were after my money when you didn't need my money at all. That must have been, Amanda paused, searching for words. Insulting, hurtful. I'm sorry, it was eye-opening, Daniel said honestly. It showed me how you think about money and partnership and trust, and it made me question whether we're actually compatible. Are we? Amanda asked quietly. Because I want to be. I love you, Daniel. I know I've been awful about this prenup thing, but I want to make it right. They spent the next month working with both their lawyers to draft a prenup that actually worked for both of them. Amanda's lawyer initially pushed back on every modification, but Amanda herself had changed. She was more willing to listen, more aware of how her wealth had made her suspicious of everyone. The final prenup was fair. Both kept their premarital trusts completely separate. Assets acquired during marriage would be split 60-40 in favor of whoever earned them, which meant Amanda's higher income would still be protected, but Daniel would have stake in their shared life. The settlement amounts were removed entirely. If they divorced, they'd go through normal divorce proceedings based on their actual circumstances, not arbitrary numbers chosen at the beginning. The fidelity clause was made mutual. Infidelity voided claims to shared assets for whoever cheated. And critically, there was a sunset clause. After 20 years of marriage, the prenup dissolved entirely, and they'd be treated as a normal married couple with fully shared assets. It was a compromise that protected both of them while allowing for genuine partnership. Daniel signed the modified prenup feeling like it represented something real. An agreement between equals who chose to protect themselves while also committing to building something together. Amanda signed it looking relieved, as if she'd finally figured out how to reconcile her love for Daniel with her fear of being used. The wedding happened 4 months later, a modest ceremony by Amanda's family standards, but still elaborate by Daniel's. They honeymooned in Italy, and for the first few months of marriage, everything seemed fine. Amanda was busy with her PR firm. Daniel continued his freelance work while also starting a small design agency with the help of his monthly trust distributions. But gradually, Daniel noticed something disturbing. Amanda's spending habits, which had always been lavish, had become reckless. She bought a second apartment as an investment without consulting him. $2.3 million paid largely in cash from her trust. She renovated their primary apartment for $400,000, changing things Daniel had liked without asking his opinion. She invested in 3 different startup companies, losing $600,000 when 2 of them failed immediately. "Amanda, we need to talk about your spending," Daniel said one evening after she came home with shopping bags from Bergdorf Goodman totaling $15,000. "This is getting out of control." "It's my money," Amanda replied, the edge back in her voice. "The prenup protects your assets from my spending, remember? So why do you care?" "Because we're married. Because watching you burn through money like this is painful. Because I thought we were partners, but you're making major financial decisions without even telling me." "I'm making decisions about my money, which I'm allowed to do. You didn't want to be financially dependent on me, remember?" "Well, this is the flip side. You don't get to control how I spend my money either." The argument revealed something Daniel had been trying to ignore. Amanda had interpreted the prenup as permission to completely separate their financial lives. She spent money like she was still single, made investments without discussion, and treated Daniel's input on financial matters as irrelevant intrusion into her business. 2 years into the marriage, Amanda's trust fund had been depleted by nearly $4 million through reckless spending and bad investments. Her PR firm was doing well, but not well enough to replace what she was burning through. And she'd started making comments about Daniel's trust fund, asking when he could access it, suggesting they could invest together once he turned 40. "You know, when you can finally touch that principal, we could do so much with it," Amanda said one evening while looking at real estate listings for vacation homes in the Hamptons. $8 million could buy us a really nice place." Daniel felt a chill. "My trust is protected by the prenup. You agreed to that. I agreed to protect what we came in with. But once you can access it, it becomes liquid assets that we could use together, as partners." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "After all, I've been supporting us mostly on my income for 2 years. It seems fair that you'd contribute when you can." "I've been contributing proportionally based on my income, exactly like the prenup specifies. Your income from freelancing, but you've also been taking distributions from the trust. And you've been saving all of that. Don't think I haven't noticed that you have significant savings built up while I've been covering most of our expenses." She wasn't wrong. Daniel had been banking most of his $2,500 monthly distributions, using them to grow his design agency and build a separate nest egg, but he'd been doing exactly what the prenup allowed, keeping his premarital assets separate and growing them independently. "Amanda, we agreed to keep our original assets separate. That was the whole point of the prenup you insisted on. That was before I understood how much you actually had. The prenup was supposed to protect my money from you, but now it looks like it's protecting your money from me. That doesn't seem fair when I'm the one paying for most of our life." Daniel stared at his wife, seeing clearly what he'd been trying to ignore. Amanda hadn't changed her fundamental view of him. She'd just recalculated his value. When she thought he was broke, she'd been protecting her wealth from him. Now that she knew about his trust, she was positioning to access it. The situation came to a head 3.5 years into their marriage. Amanda's PR firm had hit financial trouble. She'd overspent on office space and staff, made bad hiring decisions, and lost 2 major clients to competitors. She was looking at potential bankruptcy unless she could inject significant capital quickly. "I need to borrow against your trust," Amanda said one evening, presenting Daniel with papers her lawyer had drawn up. "Just $500,000 to stabilize the firm. I'll pay it back with interest once we get new clients." "I can't borrow against the trust. The terms don't allow it until I'm 40. Your trustee could advance you money if you asked. Robert Chen has discretion for emergencies. My business failing is an emergency." Daniel looked at the papers Amanda had prepared, a loan agreement that would take $500,000 from his trust, with repayment terms that were vague and interest rates that were suspiciously low. "This isn't a real loan, Amanda. This is you trying to access my trust fund to cover your bad business decisions. It's me trying to save our livelihood. My firm generates income that supports us. If it fails, we're both affected. Your firm generates income that you've been spending faster than you earn it. I've been telling you for 2 years that your spending was unsustainable. This isn't a surprise. It's a consequence." Amanda's face flushed with anger. "I spent that money building our life. The apartment renovations, the investments, the lifestyle we have, all of that was for us. It was for you. None of it was discussed with me. You made every decision unilaterally, spent your money however you wanted, and now that you're facing consequences, you want access to mine. That's not partnership, Amanda. That's using me as a backup plan." The argument escalated into the worst fight they'd had. Amanda accused Daniel of being selfish and unsupportive. Daniel accused Amanda of seeing him as a resource to be tapped rather than a partner to be respected. It ended with Amanda storming out to stay at her parents' house. 3 days later, Daniel received divorce papers. Amanda was filing for divorce, and her lawyer was claiming that Daniel's refusal to help save her business constituted abandonment and financial abuse. They were asking for a portion of his trust fund as compensation for marital support she'd provided during their marriage, arguing that the prenup should be voided because Daniel had hidden his true wealth. Daniel sat in his lawyer's office reading through the divorce filing with grim familiarity. He'd been through this once before, just from the other side. Can she actually void the prenup? His lawyer, Sarah Kim, shook her head. Not likely. The prenup was based on full disclosure. You provided complete financial information about your trust before signing. The fact that she didn't care about it at the time doesn't mean you hid it, and her spending problems aren't your legal responsibility. What about her claim that I financially abused her by refusing to loan money? That's ridiculous and won't hold up. You're not required to save your spouse from their own bad business decisions, especially when there's a prenup specifically keeping your assets separate. Sarah looked up from the papers. "But Daniel, this is going to get ugly. She's going after your trust aggressively, and her father has deep pockets for legal fees. Are you prepared for a long fight?" Daniel thought about the past 3.5 years, the prenup that had revealed Amanda's true character, the gradual realization that she saw him as a financial resource rather than a partner, the final demand for money that exposed her real reasons for marrying him. "I'm prepared. I've been preparing for this since I signed that first prenup." The divorce proceedings lasted 8 months and cost Daniel nearly $150,000 in legal fees. Amanda's lawyers tried every angle to access his trust, claiming it should be considered marital property, arguing that his grandmother's confidentiality instructions were illegal and the trust should be void, even suggesting that Daniel had defrauded Amanda by not disclosing the trust before they started dating. Nothing worked. The prenup held firm because Daniel had provided full disclosure before signing. The trust remained protected because it was structured as a separate entity with clear terms. And Amanda's claims of financial abuse collapsed when Sarah Kim presented evidence of Amanda's reckless spending, showing that her business failure was due to her own decisions, not Daniel's lack of support. The final settlement was exactly what the prenup specified. They each kept their premarital assets, split their minimal shared assets, 6040, based on who earned them, and walked away from the marriage. Amanda got nothing from Daniel's trust. Daniel got nothing from Amanda's depleted trust fund. After nearly 4 years of marriage, they were right back where they started financially, except Amanda was now facing bankruptcy while Daniel's trust continued to grow. On Daniel's 40th birthday, 6 months after the divorce was finalized, He gained full access to his trust fund. Robert Chen called him that morning to congratulate him and discuss what he wanted to do with the principal, which had grown to $9.2 million through careful management over the years. Your grandmother would be proud, Robert said. She wanted you to learn about money and people before you had full access to wealth. Sounds like you got quite an education. Daniel thought about Amanda, about the prenup she'd insisted on, about her assumptions that he was broke and needed her money. She was right that money reveals character. Amanda's prenup revealed that she saw me as a threat. My trust fund revealed that she saw me as a resource. Either way, I was never actually a partner to her, just a financial calculation. What will you do with the trust now that you have access? Daniel had thought about this a lot over the past 6 months. I'm going to keep living modestly. Grow my design agency using some of the principal. Maybe do some philanthropy like my grandmother did. But mostly, I'm going to remember what she taught me, that people should know you for who you are, not what you have. 3 years later, Daniel was sitting in a coffee shop in Brooklyn when someone spilled their latte on his laptop. Déjà vu in the most amusing way. The woman who'd done it was mortified, offering to pay for repairs, apologizing profusely. Her name was Sarah. She was a high school teacher and she clearly didn't have money to spare for laptop repairs. It's fine, Daniel said, wiping down his computer, which was old and due for replacement anyway. These things happen. They started talking, discovered they had similar tastes in books and movies and music. Daniel asked her out, and Sarah said yes, looking surprised and pleased. Their first date was at a casual restaurant in her neighborhood, splitting the check because Sarah insisted on paying her share. Over the next 6 months, Daniel learned about Sarah's life, her modest teacher salary, her student loans she was slowly paying off, her small apartment she shared with a roommate. She was smart, funny, passionate about education, and completely uninterested in money or status. When Daniel invited her to meet his family, his mother pulled him aside afterward. She's lovely, very different from Amanda. That's an understatement, Daniel said. Are you going to tell her about the trust? Daniel had thought about this. His grandmother's letter had said to keep it private until 40, but he'd reached 43 years ago. The wisdom he'd gained from Amanda's prenup had taught him the value of his grandmother's advice, but it also taught him something else. Real partnership required transparency, not just protection. I'll tell her when it's relevant. If we get serious enough to talk about marriage, she deserves to know my complete financial situation. But right now, we're just dating, and I want her to know me before she knows about the money. 8 months into dating, Daniel and Sarah were having a serious conversation about their future when money came up naturally. Sarah mentioned that she was considering getting a second job to pay off her student loans faster, and Daniel asked if he could help. That's sweet, but I can't let you do that, Sarah said. You're a freelance designer and you're not exactly rolling in money yourself. Sarah, I need to tell you something about my financial situation. It's not what you think. He explained the trust fund, his grandmother's instructions, his decision to live modestly and let people know him for who he was rather than what he had. Sarah listened with wide eyes, processing information that clearly contradicted everything she'd assumed about him. You have $10 million and you've been living like a struggling artist? She sounded more confused than upset. I have money, but it doesn't define me. I wanted you to know me, the person, not the trust fund. Does that change how you feel about me? Sarah thought about it, really thought about it in a way that made Daniel love her even more. It changes how I feel about some things, like I'm less worried about you being able to afford your half of dinner. But it doesn't change how I feel about you. You're the same person you were 5 minutes ago. What if I told you I wanted to help with your student loans, not as charity, but because I have the resources and I care about you? I'd say thank you, but I can't accept. Those loans are my responsibility and I need to pay them off myself. It's important to me. She smiled. But if you want to take me to a nicer restaurant occasionally now that I know you can afford it, I wouldn't object. They got engaged a year later and the conversation about prenups came up naturally. Daniel explained his previous marriage, Amanda's prenup, and what he'd learned about protection versus partnership. I want to be completely transparent with you about my finances, Daniel said, and I think we should have a prenup, but a fair one that protects both of us while acknowledging that we're building a life together. Sarah agreed, and they worked with lawyers to create a prenup that was nothing like Amanda's. It protected Daniel's pre-existing trust fund and Sarah's future teacher's pension. It acknowledged that wealth disparities existed, but specified that they'd work as partners to build shared assets during marriage. It had no punitive clauses, No assumptions of infidelity, no lifestyle requirements. It was simply two people protecting their individual interests while committing to shared future. This is what a prenup should be, Sarah said after signing. Partnership with protection, not suspicion with paperwork. 5 years into their marriage, Daniel and Sarah had built something Amanda never could have understood, an actual partnership. They'd used a portion of Daniel's trust to buy a modest house in a good school district. Sarah still taught and loved her work, turning down Daniel's offers to retire early. They'd started a charitable foundation focused on education, using trust income to fund programs in underprivileged schools. When they had their first child, Daniel's mother asked if he'd ever thought about what happened with Amanda. Do you regret not telling her about the trust earlier? Daniel thought about it. No, because her prenup revealed exactly who she was, someone who saw me as a financial risk when she thought I was broke, and a financial resource when she learned I wasn't. She never saw me as a partner, just as a calculation. The trust was just a test she failed. And Sarah? Sarah passed a test she didn't know she was taking. She loved me when she thought I was struggling, and she still loves me now that she knows I'm not. The money didn't change anything because she never cared about it in the first place. His mother smiled. Your grandmother knew what she was doing with that trust structure. She did. She taught me that money reveals character, both other people's and your own. Amanda's prenup revealed her character. My trust revealed mine, and Sarah's reaction to both revealed hers. 7 years after his divorce from Amanda, Daniel received a letter from her. She was asking if they could meet to discuss unfinished business. Daniel, now confident in his marriage with Sarah and his own financial security, agreed to coffee at a neutral location. Amanda looked older, more tired than he remembered. She'd filed for bankruptcy 2 years after their divorce, lost her PR firm, and was now working as a marketing consultant. Her parents were still wealthy, but apparently they'd cut off her access to family money after her business failures. I wanted to apologize, Amanda said after they'd ordered coffee, for how I treated you during our marriage. For that prenup I made you sign. For thinking you were after my money when you didn't need my money at all. I appreciate that, Daniel said sincerely. But I think the prenup was actually a blessing in disguise. It showed me who you really were before we got in too deep. I was awful to you. I see that now. I spent years protecting my money from you, and then as soon as I knew about your trust, I spent years trying to access it. I never actually saw you as a partner, just as a financial equation I needed to solve. That's accurate. Daniel's voice was gentle, but honest. But it taught me valuable lessons about transparency and real partnership. My current marriage is built on everything I learned from our divorce. Amanda smiled sadly. I heard you remarried. Is she rich? She's a high school teacher. We have a prenup that protects both of us fairly. And we're building a life together based on actual partnership, not financial calculations. I'm happy for you. Really. Amanda paused. Can I ask you something? Why didn't you tell me about the trust when we first started dating? Because my grandmother taught me to let people know me for who I am, not what I have. She said money reveals character, and she was right. Your prenup revealed yours. And what did my prenup reveal? Daniel considered how honest to be, then decided Amanda deserved truth. It revealed that you never trusted me. That you saw me as a threat to be managed rather than a partner to be respected, and when you learned about my trust, it revealed that you saw me as a resource to be accessed rather than a person to be loved. Either way, I was never really a person to you, just a financial category. Amanda was quiet for a long moment. That's fair, and harsh, but fair. She stood up to leave. Thank you for meeting with me. And thank you for teaching me something I should have learned a long time ago. Money doesn't make someone trustworthy or untrustworthy. Character does. Daniel watched her leave, feeling something close to pity. Amanda had spent her whole life surrounded by wealth, protected by prenups and family money, and financial structures designed to keep people away. She'd never learned to trust, never learned to see beyond financial calculations, never learned that real partnership required vulnerability. That evening, Daniel came home to find Sarah grading papers at their kitchen table while their daughter napped upstairs. She looked up and smiled, and Daniel felt grateful for everything his grandmother's wisdom had taught him, everything Amanda's prenup had revealed, everything Sarah's love had proven. How was coffee with your ex-wife? Sarah asked. Enlightening. She apologized for the prenup and how she treated me. That's big of her. Do you forgive her? I do, because that prenup was the best thing she ever did for me. It showed me exactly who she was before I wasted more of my life with someone who couldn't see me as a partner. Sarah came over and kissed him. Your grandmother sounds like she was a smart woman. She was. She taught me that money reveals character. Amanda's prenup revealed hers. My trust revealed mine. And your reaction to all of it revealed yours. Daniel pulled Sarah close. Turns out, the best test of character is how people treat money they don't need and trust they haven't earned yet. The moral of this story is layered and profound. It teaches us that assumptions about financial status can reveal deep character flaws. Amanda spent their entire relationship assuming Daniel was broke, never bothering to ask about his actual financial situation. She made decisions based on incomplete information and paid the price when her assumptions proved false. We learn that prenups can reveal true intentions and character. Amanda's original prenup wasn't designed to protect both parties fairly. It was designed to keep Daniel financially dependent while giving him nothing in return. That imbalance revealed how she truly saw him, as a threat to be managed, not a partner to be respected. The story teaches us about the wisdom of delayed access to wealth. Daniel's grandmother structured his trust to ensure he'd mature before gaining full access, forcing him to build character and wisdom before having money to potentially corrupt him. That structure allowed him to learn who people really were before wealth complicated relationships. We see that transparency in relationships is crucial, but timing matters. Daniel wasn't wrong to keep his trust private initially. His grandmother's advice to let people know him for who he was proved valuable. But once relationships became serious, full disclosure became essential for genuine partnership. Most importantly, we learned that real partnership requires seeing beyond financial calculations. Amanda could never move past viewing Daniel through a financial lens, first as a threat to be protected against, then as a resource to be accessed. Sarah saw him as a person first, with money being an incidental detail rather than a defining characteristic. The call to action is clear. If you're requiring a prenup, make sure it's fair to both parties. Prenups that are one-sided often reveal problematic views about partnership and trust. Protect yourself, but don't use legal documents as weapons to keep your partner powerless. Don't make assumptions about people's financial situations. Ask directly, honestly, respectfully. Amanda's assumptions led her to treat Daniel poorly, and when she discovered the truth, she couldn't adjust her view of him beyond financial terms. If you have wealth, consider following Daniel's grandmother's wisdom. Let people know you for who you are before they know what you have. Money changes relationships, often revealing people's true characters once they know you're wealthy. In relationships, focus on partnership over protection. Yes, protect your assets reasonably, but don't structure relationships around assuming your partner is a threat. If you can't trust someone enough to see them as a partner, maybe you shouldn't be marrying them. Remember that character reveals itself through actions, not words. Amanda talked about partnership but structured everything around protecting herself from Daniel. Her actions revealed what she really believed about him and their relationship. Finally, understand that tests of character work both ways. Daniel's trust fund tested Amanda's character. She failed by trying to access it when convenient. But Amanda's prenup also tested Daniel's character. He passed by not needing her money and maintaining his dignity when she tried to take his. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it touched you, if it made you think differently about wealth, partnership, and the tests that reveal true character, please share it with someone who needs this message. Subscribe to hear more stories about hidden truths, financial complications, and the unexpected ways that wealth reveals what people really value. Leave a comment about your own experiences with prenups, assumptions, or moments when someone's true character was revealed through their relationship with money. May you have the wisdom to know someone for who they are before money complicates the relationship. May you create fair partnerships that protect everyone while building something together. May you remember that assumptions reveal more about the person making them than about the person being assumed about. Remember, when someone makes you sign a prenup thinking you're broke, they're revealing exactly what they think of you. And sometimes the best response is letting them continue thinking that until their assumptions cost them everything they were trying to protect.